I'm going to do a couple of textures using some basic colors. This is a texture to create, it's not a really great face color, but I'm going to create this sort of yellow, I want to create a yellow a yellowish tan face pattern, and to do that I want to get this sort of a sandwich, but to create this kind of sandwich I have to first go in and cut up all these slices of clay with a knife, then put each slice together, and once they're at this scale, add the thinnest amount of yellow. I want this sharp color to be very small because this is a background texture, this is a skin texture, this is not a foreground texture, so I don't want it to be super loud. I want it to sort of, once it's compressed, I want it to fade into the background. So I'm doing this by hand. I could probably put this through a grinder, make it a little less time-consuming handwork, but part of why you do it by hand is ultimately the texture needs to be something that I think will make sense for skin. So you can see the component pieces right there that make that texture. If you do enough of it, you'll get a lot of them. So this is, all of this is the same process as these are to make it by hand. And then at some point I'm going to want to use these textures to make a face. I think I'm going to do a rotating face with the textures, a spinning face, a face that's turning around. And it's a little bright. Maybe the key would be to make sure that you have to decide what level of texture you want for your yeah, so it gets a little more neutral there. It's yellowish, tannish, but not too bright. It's not as bright as it feels here because there's a really tiny amount of yellow, and the rest of the stuff is taking up most of the colors. There are many different ways to take this texture to make it into skin. The simplest way is just to twist it around. This is a texture. If you just twist it, it might be okay because a lot of this will be just fudge and putty to sort of shift a shape around, but I may use this texture if I were making a face, for example. I may want to lay it down and use it just like this to make a nose. So I wouldn't want to twist it in too many shapes. If I was trying to make a nose, I would just start off and say, hey, let's keep the straight pattern, add a little bit of wobble to it, and then you already have sort of the bridge of the nose and the two nostrils, and then you can fill in using this more random color, fill in a little the other side of the wedge. And this adds a little, again, pattern and shape. Chaos and clarity are kind of the way I think. This would be the pattern, and this is the chaos. There's a little bit of chaos inside the pattern, but you'll know that it's a nose. The downside of this method of just this nose right now would be this is kind of straight, and this is really random. So it could be that these two don't work together well. If you have a face, you'll be watching this kind of little kinetic activity a little too much. It'll be going blah, 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 all the way through, whereas this will be pretty much just sort of wow, 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 which could be good or bad. It's not a definite answer. It's just a choice, and I wanted to describe how, when I think about pattern, I can create more random patterns or more designed patterns. I tend not to put strong patterns where I'm trying to get features to show up, like where eyes are you want to limit the amount of pattern if you have if you're trying to look at something really clearly, but I do a lot of pattern where it doesn't matter, like in hair. Hair is an easy one because it's very fluid and it doesn't need, you can put a stronger pattern, like you can put a diagonal or some pattern that's very, very strong and hard at a diagonal. Here, this is just random and straight, and part of that would be because I'd be wanting to watch the eyes or what the features of the character are doing. In this case, if I were to create for example, a rotating nose, you would want to actually shift it from one side to the next. And you can kind of build that already into the pattern. So here would be the nose of the character looking one way. Here's the nose of the character looking the other way. And you've already, what you'll do is you'll make an eye, this is how it would be seen, the nose looking this way, and by the time you get to the back, the nose is looking that way. You can put an eye looking off this way, it disappears, it looks straight, you have two eyes here, and then by the time you get here you only have one eye looking that way through the profile of the nose. So this is the front view, this is the profile looking left, this is the profile looking right, and that's how you'd use a pattern. It's still, remember, it's two lines of sheets of stuff. May not be the best solution, but it is one way to do it. I may want to make it a little less rigid and obvious, but this is a fairly okay cartoon. The smaller I'm trying to work, the more obvious you try to get because it's harder to understand. So at this scale, which is not that large, I may want to actually go this cartoony. At a larger scale, I would go more sophisticated. I'd be more like an impressionist painter, and I would add more subtler pieces of highlight and dark with different kinds of textures that were smaller to create that. And if I was even smaller, I'd go even cartoonier. So this is sort of a mid-range of cartoon where there's some texture going on and some coherency. So this is the flesh color. Of course, I could use regular Caucasian skin tone or brown skin tone or any kind of skin tone or even albino. But this is just one way to accomplish that. Now I want to talk about hair. These are the components I'm going to use for hair. The ultimate end result is some sandwiches that look like this. So you can see I use various forms of really dark brown, sort of lighter, nice chocolate brown, and then burnt sienna, sort of red brown, black, and this sort of off yellow. And again, I'm trying not to make too competitive of a texture. So you put all these sandwich pieces together, and it gets you, this kind of a pattern. This is a very large pattern, but now I can either make it smaller. Let me just take one little piece of it to work with. You can make it a smaller pattern. So I've already sort of reduced it in half and double it up on itself. So this would be hair that could go with this other texture that's face color. They would be all in warm browns and yellow fleshes. So it's a certain kind of palette I'm trying to create. Now this hair I could do all kinds of things with. You could make curls or zigzags. It's often fun if you're doing, you could do a little Shirley Temple braid just by zigzagging the pattern like that on the head. Again, I would put a face in there and I would finish this hair out, but I'm just showing you the texture pattern of the hair that allows you to then decide that's the basic texture pattern, but I can do all kinds of tricks then once I have this sandwich of stuff. And you have to imagine that perhaps I've finished off the top of the head with more color, and you know, there's a full head of hair. So this could be an entire character built now out of 2 braids, some abstract texture at the top, and you put 2 eyes. If I had built 2 eyes in there, this would be the face color, this would be the hair color, and they'd all be sort of toned together. And that's the theory of when I try to create a palette of texture before I make a character, or as I pre-plan. This is what I would all call sous chefing. The making of the sandwiches of color, and again, it's sort of impressionist. It's like Seurat or Van Gogh. You put a certain palette of pointillism or line strokes into your clay and think about it as an animated series of line strokes, and then use these. One thing you would do with this is probably also put it on an angle and put a pattern in it. Instead of if this is the face, why not, you know, not have a stable pattern but actually have an animated pattern. So now I have hair braids actually on that face, cut from this angle, and those hair braids are animating down, actively down. And that makes it interesting, as long as it doesn't distract from the main idea. And it just depends on what you're trying to say with your block. If you're trying to do something that's textural and fun, then it's probably good to put this stuff in. If you're actually trying to do a smaller moment of activity where you're honing in on a bit of motion, this may be too much action. Textures, sous chefs, creating palettes. This is like a bunch of paint getting mixed together, getting ready to actually put it on the canvas. This is all prep work before you actually start to build.